Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, kua hui hui mai nei I tēnei rā, ki te ako te whakarongo ki tēnei kōrero, nō reira tēnā tātou katoa. Ka timata mā te karakia, kia hora te marino. Kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Haumi e hui e, tā iki e. Kia ora everyone, and welcome to this October episode of the Whāki webinar. Just to introduce myself, this is my first time being a co-host on this. So ko Paul Brown tōku ingoa. He uri ahau no Tainui me Ngāti e Kairo hoki. Kei te mahi ahau ki te University of Waikato, ki runga te rorohiko me ngā putai o Pāngaro. So my name is Paul Brown from the University of Waikato, and I'm in the Department of Mathematics and affiliated with the Te Kotahi Research Institute, which is hosting the Whāki webinar series, affiliated to them through the Tikanga and Technology Project. We're really excited and fortunate today to have Kay Marie Dunn join us. I'll let Kay Marie introduce herself in a sec. But I was fortunate enough to meet Kay Marie in Phoenix, Arizona earlier this year. And we were both in a panel on artificial intelligence technologies and tech justice with algorithmic bias, and she gave a great talk there. So looking forward to having a conversation with her today. Just so that you're aware of the structure of today, we're just going to have kind of an interview style chat, talking around how multi-data sovereignty looks like in Kay Marie's businesses, and maybe moving towards a more general chat on multi-data sovereignty and what that looks like in the business and commercial space, and also with new and emerging and rapidly advancing technologies, how multi-data sovereignty, what it looks like in that space, and how perhaps it can help move us forward towards better outcomes for us, due to the fact that some of these AI technologies aren't great for Indigenous communities. So I would like to pass it on to Kay Marie to introduce herself, and that'd be great.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Tutahi he mihi tēnei kia koutou, no te whare wānanga o Waikato, nei ranga mihi a matakuikui kia koutou, e tautoko ana, e hāpai ake tēnei kaupapa e pānei ki te mahi hangarau. Kia koutou, ngā tangata toru te kau, ki te haramai, ki te whakarongo ki uku kōrero pahupahu pea, ngā mihi nunui kia koutou. Tōku pāpā he uri no Ngāti Manawa ki te Rarawa, no te wāhi a tāhua ko Pangaru. Ko tētahi atu wāhi ko te hikutu ki Ngāpuhi, ki Ngāti Korokoro ki Ngāpuhi, tōku karani pāpā. Tōku kuia no Ngāti Mahanga ki Waikato, tōku karaua no Ngai Tā Manuhiri ki te Tai Rāwhiti, me Ngai Te Rangi Koe anake ki Kahanganu. From my tupuna to all of yours, what a wonderful way to start our day. So, tēnā koutou. Thank you, Paul, for the welcome, and again to all of you who are taking your time out of your day, away from your whānau and your mahi to come and hang out with us. I'm hoping that our yarn will be useful. Also very welcome very open to welcome any divergent thinking or thoughts as well. And as Paul has said, we're hoping this is a kōrero, an open discussion. But because each of you are here too, I'd really like to encourage you to be involved as well. And so there are our little icons down the bottom, our little reactions. So that'll just give us a little bit of a visual cue on where you're at. And, today, as Paul has mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit about, my own kind of clumsy moving through this world and what it's like being a Māori, entering into these predominantly non-Māori spaces. How do we try and find our way as Indigenous peoples into commercial spaces? What do those commercial agreements look like, and the real difficulty? Like, there's the song and dance about Māori data sovereignty, which is really important. I'm not going to take that away. But when the rubber hits the road, what does it actually look like when you actually fold out commercial agreements and trying to get your product into a market? And then I'm also just hoping to kind of wax lyrical about some general hopes and aspirations I have for these technologies, because I think there's so much in front of us as well. So, kia ora, Paul. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Kei Marie. So just for the structure, so like we said before, and Kei Marie just mentioned, this will be just a general kōrero between us, but welcome to address any pātai. So feel free to, if you've got any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. Where I imagine the talk will probably go for 30 to 35 minutes, so the rest of the time we're able to address any questions that you have. So the first question I have for you, Kei Marie, is just to give us an idea of the kind of businesses that you're involved in, and those that are very much data driven.
So kia ora, everyone. I've just put in the chat my website for the organisation that we've stood up. Before I kind of launch into the company background, can I please just get a love heart or a thumbs up if you feel that you've got pretty good understanding on Māori data sovereignty? I don't really want to talk about things that you already got a good handle on. I'd kind of like us to play in another little zone. But in saying that, there may also be those that are here that don't have much knowledge at all. So I've got some 101 information in the background. I'm definitely not a specialist, but if you've got a pretty good understanding and awareness of Māori data sovereignty, that would be cool. And I might just kind of fill in some gaps where I can. Okay, that's awesome. So we've got a few of you amazing individuals in here that know, and equally we've got some that might not know. So that's good. It gives me a good starter ground. So about 2018, actually, I'll give you a bit of backstory about me. So I grew up in a small community called Fielding in the Manawatu. I am the daughter of a freezing worker and a stay-at-home mum. I'm the baby of 11 children on my mother's side, and I'm the middle daughter with 3 brothers on my father's side. You would have heard that I've got quite a mixed background. Some might say a mongrel background, and that's all good, but I do have mixed lineage, including my Irish whakapapa. And I say that I think I feel like I've got Scottish bones inside me as well, because I spent a bit of time a few years ago there, and I just felt at home there. So I'm hoping I'm Scottish too. I have been raised as a child to learn, not necessarily through asking questions. So my parents were pretty old school. They were born in the 1930s, and they came through kind of quite severe colonisation and assimilation during the 1950s. So they were of that time where, in order to get on in life, you were to be a good Pākehā. So unfortunately, my parents' generation did not have the reo. And I was raised far, far away from my hokainga, from where my people lived. Although my stepfather and the community that I lived in, Ngāti Kaupata and Fielding, we had marae there. And also I was brought up with my stepfather's whānau. And all of the the mischievous skills that I picked up in my hometown. But I definitely knew what it felt like to not feel connected to the people in the place where I lived. And I also knew what it felt like to grow up away from my kāinga. So not growing up with my marae, my narratives, my history. Couple that with, intergenerational and historic trauma. It's a really beautiful mix of an environment and incubation. But growing up in Fielding, there's not much to do. If any of you grew up in small towns, you have to learn to be creative and you have to learn to make your own fun. Why is that important? Is because I think that, my entrepreneurial skills of trying to always improve and make things better was definitely seeded and crafted in the community of Fielding. And also being the baby of 11, I got to see the pitfalls of my older siblings, where to walk and where not to. And then I landed in Wellington. I ran away from Fielding and landed to the University of Victoria. And that's kind of where I really peaked my, I'd say my activism training. So I was very privileged to spend time with some of them who are politicians today, but also, aunties, uncles, kuia kaumātua that I learnt from to understand not only colonisation and the historical impacts, but also the political context that we operate in. So I definitely became attuned to land rights, political issues, and our lack of participation in civic education. And one piece that was consistent, because after my time at university, I then spent a decade working across a range of government departments in Child, Youth and Family, which is now known as Oranga Tamariki, as an auditor in the Department of Labour. We were brought in to take on the second phase of work after Parekura and the Community Employment Group was disestablished. That was a time when millions of dollars had been invested into communities for community-led projects. We were kind of brought in to try and forget or ensure that the communities forgot that body of work occurred. That's also quite an important milestone in my career because I saw and felt the impact of what economic disadvantage took place when decision-making was no longer housed within our communities. I then did a stint in Māori tourism, Plunket and Māori health. I kind of hid out in the judges' chambers inside the Māori Land Court. So I got to see the inner workings of how decisions around Māori land were made at the highest level here in Aotearoa. And then I also used to go down and bother a woman called Irene Kiriyama, who was the chief registrar for the Waitangi Tribunal. So I used to poke my head around and just see what they were up to try and understand the journey of tribunal claims. After my role there, I worked in Māori tourism, got to travel the country and see amazing Māori businesses doing amazing work, celebrating matariki. And then I did my kind of final stint in the for-purpose sector in Māori housing. So I spent a good year helping to establish some quite cool foundations around Māori housing. We hosted the first National Māori Housing Conference, and that then birthed Te Matapihi He Tirohanga Ki Te Ao, which is the National Māori Housing Peak body. All of that is really, and that's just part up until 2010. I had a son in between there, so I've got a 18, nearly 19-year-old son. So trying to find my place in the world, trying to navigate government, trying to understand data, information, really seeing the pointy edge and the crisis edge of Māori communities, becoming aware of practices such as permaculture, alternative economies and currencies, and also the real lack of access to capital. That was my training ground. And there's a lot of things in between there, but that was my training ground, which enabled me to look for, listen for, and see things that I thought were important in regards to how do we transform at the root cause some of the critical issues that our people are facing today. Fast forward to 2018, I just spent 7 years working with Māori Women's Development Inc., supporting wahine Māori in business, helping to design and deliver a range of programs across financial literacy, business development for rangatahi, social enterprise. We launched the first Indigenous crowdfunding campaign, and we also launched, I believe, one of the first Indigenous time banks as well. It was a bit of a failed experiment, that one, because we didn't quite have all the fundamentals wrapped around it. But by the time 2017, 2018 arrived, I had kind of got to that place, when you're giving advice around business and you actually need to move into the next phase, which is how do I actually be about my business? So I took a brave step, and I was brought into a leadership program called the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. It was the first of, I believe, maybe like 8 or 9 cohorts that they've hosted in Aotearoa since. But the cohort was designed around the recognition of Aotearoa as an impact and innovation incubator. And it brought forward a range of amazing change makers, investors, and technologists. And in that space, I met 3 significant people. And I'm going to get to the point, Whānau, around, well, where's this all heading? There was a gentleman called Mark Pascal, and whilst I was hanging out at the fellowship one dark evening in a spa pool, he started to talk about this thing called blockchain. And I was really interested in what he was talking about, because they were just having this, yarn. Old Māori girl over in the corner going, oh, what are you fellas talking about? So they were saying things like, this has the potential to revolutionize data sovereignty. None of those things were really what really grabbed my attention. The part that did grab my attention is that this has the ability, based on Bitcoin, which I hadn't heard of either at that point, to give power back to everyday individuals so that our financial future wasn't just caught up in banks. Now, I had spent, good 5 to 7 years investigating alternative economies, so green dollars, barter, time banks that were born in the Bronx in America, and launched into the world by an amazing human called Edgar Kahn. And also, the practice of permaculture and kaitiakitanga. There are some really pivotal and critical principles that shaped my mind by that point. And I met another man called Aaron McDonald, where we started to jam together around banks, just feeling that banks themselves never had our interests at heart. Currently, the head of the top party is a man called Raf Manji. And Raf had shared a book into this network that I was part of around alternative currencies, which really gave quite an interesting insight into the economic meltdown and what took place, how all the banks started to collapse, and then also how their governments, including ours, started to bail out all of these banks. But what I remember during that time was the devastation, the absolute devastation on everyday mother and father investors that lost their life savings and their homes because they put full and 100% trust in institutions that were supposed to take care of their money. And so you had all these people that were destitute, and also many had committed suicide as a result of that financial crisis. So when Aaron and I met, we talked about banks, and banks have never really been designed by or for Indigenous peoples. We have had our own practices around trade, and I wouldn't say business in a Western form, but definitely wealth creation and sharing our products and services globally. And so when we talked about what would it look like if we were to create some sort of banking system or financial currency system that would help us reclaim our power, reclaim our mana motuhake. And then Aaron said, look, I'd love to offer you an opportunity to come and work with me in Centrality. Let's figure it out. So I did. And there's a series called WTF is Crypto. You can watch a little bit about the history of my thinking and my business. It's on TVNZ Plus, 6 episodes, 20 minutes a pop, so it's pretty easy to learn about. But you'll get to meet Aaron and some of the amazing work that he's been involved in. But he took a punt on somebody who knew nothing about technology, but I had an idea. And the idea that I pitched to my colleagues and my friends at the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, and also to Aaron to help incubate, was the concept of Indigicoin, which my hypothesis was, what would it look like if money raised in value based on the good that you did in the world? So what if you could be recognized for looking after your grandmother or your children? What would it look like if you were able to get a little coin for going to volunteer down at your marae or plant trees? The reason why I talk about this is because I wanted to look at other ways that we could identify and value the work that we do. Because what I did learn from time banks is that the tapestry that joins and strengthens community is actually our voluntary labour. Yeah. The way that we look after our children, the way that we look after our old people, the voluntary work that we do, all of that is pretty much not valued in our current economic system. And so I took these kind of broad ideas, and then we turned up on the Monday to Centrality, and it was me and about 10 other young, amazing rangatahi Māori. They gave us a corner office and they said, well, look, here, go, figure it out. And we didn't know anything about the technology. We didn't know anything about anything in regards to blockchain. The language was like way over our heads. And we had about 1 to 2 months to try and pull together our ideas. I will know I'm a terrible muster for project as a project lead, because my brain goes, woo. And so you have to be really awesome at being able to pick all those threads up and pull it together. So for a wide range of reasons, and I would say, one, the technology wasn't ready, but what was important to note was we weren't able to get Indigicoin at that point off the ground, but I was invited to come back into this hackathon and put forward an idea. So at a hackathon, we pulled some peeps together, and one of those was my co-founder of Aho, Ben Tairea. He was the software engineer. And when I kind of we tried to persuade him, my partner Hemi had tried to persuade him to come and join our team. He wasn't interested. So I don't want to know anything about banking or crypto. That's dumb. But we said, come on, bro, just come and check it out. So I kind of pitched the idea of Indigicoin, and my friends that were there were really supportive, but it didn't quite jam. And then we started to talk about Māori land, and some of the issues that we face as Māori and trying to make decisions and get developments occurring, and what could blockchain or these technologies look like for us. And then we landed on whakapapa. And whakapapa was really that golden moment where I will say that the skies opened up, because it really made sense to me when I realised the fabric that joins all of humanity is whakapapa and genealogy. And imagine if you could build a framework based on genealogy, kaupapa Māori, mātauranga Māori principles, then you could join a whole massive network of people together. And also, in time, we will build Indigicoin. So I've still got that vision over here. It's probably morphed into a digital bank, but at the minute, I'm the team, whom I'm not so heavily involved with at an operational level. We've been supported from a grant from Whānau to continue to build on what we did launch into the world. Sorry, I should go there. We did launch a decentralized system where you can download the app, you can load up your whakapapa, you can load up and create your own whānau archive. It's completely safe as you are, depending on what your practice is with your own information. And then from there, we've done quite a bit of intensive work around digital identity. So what might it look like for us to be able to have a complementary identity to the one that we have currently? So we've got a team, and we're grateful for a grant from the Whānau Foundation for that. And also we're grateful for the many organisations, iwi early adopters that just trusted us. Like, to be honest, I didn't know the technology, didn't really know where we were going to land. So it was really by pure faith that our early tribal adopters jumped on board. So I do have to acknowledge Ngāti Pāua, Ngāti Hine Forestry Trust, my own marae, Ngāti Manua, who came on, and Kahukura Ariki Trust, who came on, excited about what this technology could mean for our communities. And we're now developing a prototype around digital identity as well. So it's a really long story, Whānau, which gives a bit of background context, which helps shape my thinking. Somebody who's been non-technical, and then us kind of launching a hoe into the world. The other hand of mine, my other company, Making Everything Achievable, we've been using our influence in the tech sector. We partnered up with Te Whare Wānau Awanuiarangi to launch, Awanuiarangi, Dr. Karaitiana Tauru, Dr. John Clayton, Whaehenerangi, and a team to map the Māori tech sector. So we're looking at some of the barriers and challenges our people face to really flourish in technology. And I've also been quite a strong advocate for how we might encourage our people to enter into technology, whether or not that's at a marae level through our Marae Matahiko program, or Digital Boost for entrepreneurs. So I've just got a love for technology generally. Am I any more technical? Probably not, but that's okay. All you are awesome technical people and researchers. So I really lean into other people's intelligences to help bring my ideas to life. Kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora, Kei Marie. That is some journey, and really interesting as well. From your, I suppose, earlier career in the public sector, moving into the business world, and then really embracing these new technologies. And yeah, it was really interesting your kōrero around the 2008 global financial crisis, and the part that banks and governments played, and we see the effects of it today with the lack of trust in institutions. I mean, it's part of it. I mean, there's been a history, especially with Indigenous communities, not just in 2008 with the global financial crisis, but that event did nothing to make us any more trusting in our institutions that are supposed to be working for us. So it's really interesting kōrero around that. And then moving into the digital space, the digital coins, with this idea of Indigicoin. And one of the things that struck me with what you said was around a lot of the work that is actually done is voluntary work. Think of relatives caring for another relative who's sick, even just parenting, staying at home. And these are not economically rewarded. And if Indigicoin has some role in actually helping to value those, then that's really great. I just want to ask a couple of questions surrounding Māori data sovereignty. You talked about whakapapa, and I totally agree. Whakapapa is central to, for those of you that are not too aware of Māori data sovereignty, it's really a way to balance the power of those that hold the data and use the data to those who the data is about. That's probably more Indigenous data sovereignty. So it's a way of rebalancing power. And so for Māori data sovereignty, we have our own version of, or our own ways of thinking around what Indigenous data sovereignty looks like for us. And whakapapa is one of the central tenets of Māori data sovereignty. And, coupled with concepts like mana and giving mana back to the people who the data is about, not so much the people that have the data, that have control of it. There's got to be some power balance back to those who it's about. So in saying that, I just want to ask Kei Marie, um, how does, in terms of the development of your products, say the Aho app, actually, are you okay if I share that site, your website in the chat there so people
Of
can have
course,
a
I
look?
think I put it in there too, but chuck it
Oh,
in
have
there.
you? Oh, okay. Oh, no, you have to. Okay, sorry. But yeah, how does multi-data sovereignty and these ideas of power balancing influence the end product of um of what you have, and also around what multi-data sovereignty looks like when you're interacting in a commercial space. Um, and perhaps you're working with non-Māori and with these products, how the take up of multi-data sovereignty is to those that aren't Māori. If you've got any thoughts or experience on that.
Well, that's a triple header question
Yeah,
there,
sorry.
Paul. So I think from level one, if I talk to my aunties and uncles, even my brothers and sisters about Māori data sovereignty, you're going to get like a blank face, like straight up. They're going to be like, "What? What is that?" So one of the very first issues that we had to tackle was to try and break down. And Māori data sovereignty actually wasn't where we started. Where we started was, how do we feel? What is our current practices actually around the management, retention, and protection of whakapapa, and understanding the sharing of that knowledge, the access to that knowledge, the obligations and responsibility that comes with that knowledge. We had to do a really deep dive into that space. And when it comes to merging whakapapa and technology, some of our people just swallowed it up. They love the platforms like ancestry.com and others, like Family Search, which are very much intimately connected with the Church of Latter-day Saints. They were very comfortable with the use of these technologies. But for my other kuia kaumātua, for example, Pahenare Tate, he had an absolute dislike and mistrust of technology. Whānau were not to put any whakapapa information on Facebook. And also, just taking recordings of certain pieces of whakapapa. So, really it's shrouded in this, it's not even a concept, a practice of tapu, the sacred nature of our mātauranga, our knowledge around our origins is one of the most important integral parts of our culture. So we had some very, very deep wānanga around, what does this mean for us when we start to move into these technical spaces? What do we need to think about? What do we need to consider? And we started there. Over time, some of the concerns that came up were, how do we know that our information is safe? How do I know that you're not going to take my information if I put it into your system and use it to take my land? How do I know that you're not going to interfere with the information that I put into your system? And so a lot of those worries and concerns were really the first big conversation starters that we had to have. And if you can imagine trying to have that conversation with your own relations who at least know you and love you, that's quite a different conversation from, a taumata kaumātua or rangatira that don't know you at all. And having to make them feel comfortable and at ease that not only is our intention tika and pono, but the way that we will think about and consider your sacred information is as important as it was my own. And that's quite different, I would say, from a distinct commercial lens where I'm trying to find a way to monetize every single activity so that I can make some money off you. And we just didn't feel okay that genealogy should be something that we monetize. There are elements of it that could be monetized, but we made a commitment as an organization that Aho would always be free. Our updates are always free, and that whānau would never have to worry about paying a subscription fee, and that knowledge would be cut off from them. So I think that's kind of phase one. Phase two, when it comes to, you know, the more nitty-gritty stuff of Māori data sovereignty in practice, you know, we had to really think quite hard on, you know, how do we design the platform so that, again, people feel safe. So things like having a integrated karakia into the system. I can't recall if we've actually got one, but you can kind of play an audio file, because I think there are three cool things that I've really enjoyed on this learning journey. Is our engineers, many who weren't Māori, you know, would ask us questions like, in the Māori world, you know, when you don't mix food, kai, and whakapapa, so you'd never put a whakapapa book or a record onto your kai table. You'd never put it anywhere near your head. So there's, again, a level of tapu around that information, where you share it, how you share it. So as engineers, they said, hey, look, what could we consider, or should we consider, fasting when we're coding, because we want to make sure that the sanctity of our work reflects, you know, the tapu nature of the data that's coming into your repository, and the build and the design of your repository. I don't know if anybody else in the world has had these kinds of conversations. I think they may have now, since RT has been out, and a lot of these kind of very deep whānau have been happening across Māoridom. But these kind of questions that we were raising, you know, 6-7 years ago, I hadn't heard of, and I hadn't seen any research done around how do we take our mātauranga into these spaces. How do you be tapu when you're dealing with technology that's not designed by us or for us? So I think that was really important. And really great learning for us as well. And I think it also helps us tell a story around, again, how serious we took your sovereignty, your mana motu hake over, and tino rangatiratanga over your own data, and what we were thinking about. And also, again, you don't want to upset your elders, your old people. And we also wanted to make it easy enough for our tamariki to utilise as well. So those are some of the things that we consider from a design lens. I think that the other part, you know, these questions that were raised by different hapu marae iwi around, you know, what might we do? Like, how do they know that we're not going to go in and tutu with their work or change anything? You know, there's some pros and cons of decentralized technology. The pro is, you know, you download it onto your own device in your own system, and that's it. We don't have any access to it. The con of that, unfortunately, is that if you lose it, or if you lose your code or your password, we can't help you with that either. So it really meant that communities had to look at their own tikanga and kawa around what do they do in those circumstances. And I think the other part of the technology, which is where our partners Scuttlebutt came in handy, was enabling individuals to be able to have what we call a pātaka stored. Could be at your marae, could be, you know, in your runanga office, could be at home, but it was basically a computer that was running 24/7, always on, and it was a place that I could store a copy of my whakapapa. So I can load up and connect to a pātaka. I can sync my device to that pātaka. And the cool thing is that when I go offline or I go home or move away, whatever, and I might make some edits to my genealogy record or my archive, when I come back into, kind of like a Google Drive, but when I come back into the vicinity of the pātaka, it'll automatically sync. And my information will be updated. And the other cool thing about it is that it was still encrypted. So even your whānau can't get into the records that are on the pātaka as well. And I think what we were doing here in providing that service was, again, really taking tino rangatiratanga and Māori data sovereignty to a whole other level, and actually ensuring that we have it at home. And then the third part was training. So it's all good. Anybody can have an app. Anybody can have a pātaka. But if our people don't understand what it is that they have in their hands, and they don't know how to use the tool, they don't know how to talk about it, then our work would be meaningless and not useful. So we had, again, a bit of support from Te Puni Kōkiri and the Department of Internal Affairs, who wrapped around us and supported us to enable us to run some training programs and approaches for rangatahi, so that they could use the technology as well. The third part of your question around commercial, it's probably been one of my hardest parts that I've had to traverse, not only because I've come from government and understand, there's an imbalance inherently in the way that we contract, or even like in the venture capital spaces. Again, we don't have a great deal of people of colour, Indigenous peoples, with large technology VC funds, even here in Aotearoa. So, you've got to be really careful not to sell your soul in order to get investment. So we had a really great deal with Centrality, who took 10% equity in our business, and have continued to support us since we started. And as we've grown, we've been very grateful for grants. But what we wanted to do is develop as much of the technology as we can before we go to market for investors. And I think it's been hard for a range of reasons. I think that when you get beyond the concept and the idea and the feel good of Māori data sovereignty, and we did a lot of work around imbuing our company constitution with Māori values, principles, tikanga. But does that then translate into a investment proposition? Not always. And I think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that we don't have to compromise our values when it comes to equity-based relationships at a commercial level. And then I think there's the other part for consideration around scale. So, once you've gotten to a place of employing people and, taking your ideas and actually building things, how do we keep our sanity and our commitment to the values that we have put forward, to our communities, but equally to ourselves. And I think that that's also quite hard as well, that, when we have conversations around who's contributed what is valued, are relationships as valuable as hard code? These are some really hard conversations that we've had to have as a company. And I think that they are really important considerations. If you're growing a technology business, is how do you ensure that that the principles and values that you subscribe to stay all the way through. Aha ko ngā piki me ngā heke, despite ups and downs, that you kind of maintain your position. So I definitely do have a differing value, a differing understanding of value and contribution. And I think that there isn't really a Bible, blueprint or guidebook for how to navigate the world of technology as a Māori entrepreneur, also as and how do you also maintain mātauranga Māori in that space as well.
Kia ora, Kay Marie. That was thank you for answering those questions. That navigation of Te Ao Māori values alongside the commercial space, I can imagine that to be at times pretty tough to traverse. But I think your work with and your kōrero around technologies like Ancestry.com and your kind of alternative to that, this Aho app is really good, because a lot of that data that Ancestry.com collects on everyone's whakapapa is then commercialized and used, and like you said, whakapapa for us is not something that should probably be monetized.
Bro, to be honest, like, I don't have an issue with monetizing. To be honest, I don't have any issue with that if those that benefit are the people that belong to that.
Yeah, well,
genetic material data.
I agree in the sense that as long, under a current systems, the benefits aren't necessarily distributed in a fair and equal way, and that's the problem I have with that I might have with a business like Ancestry.com monetizing whakapapa is that the benefits don't go back to those that are giving up their data, giving up their whakapapa. And they make a ton of money on these things. So it's more that, I suppose, for me, that redistribution of benefits
In wealth.
that aren't taken into consideration that could be an issue. We do have a question from the audience, from Jude. What are your thoughts about how one would collaborate with other organizations in terms of sharing data and information whilst maintaining respect for values and culture? Do you have any thoughts on that, Kay Marie?
Our organisation, we use what we call a mana enhancing agreement, which is essentially a memorandum of agreement which outlines our values and principles, our ways of working, and then how might you as a partner, come on board. And I think that like nitty-gritties inside of those agreements is how will we work together, how will we meet, how will we share resources, who does what, and also, shared benefits. It's like I said, what I think is quite interesting is where the conversation kind of spins into a different space when we're like, talk money. Now I'm like, okay, so what's money going to look like and how are we going to, share the benefits? Because you see, we're sexy. Indigenous people are sexy. We make projects sexy. People want to jump on board and partner up with Māori because, we're awesome. We are. And so they commercialize off that partnership. And again, I have no problem about entering into a commercial partnership as long as we're super clear about how the money is going to be split and how we benefit collaboratively. I think that where it can also get a bit tricky is our Māori operating in this space. I think business principles still apply in the relationship and agreement, but equally it doesn't mean that we should not be also seeking advice, consent from those that are working with us as Māori. I think that we cannot be putting ourselves in a position where we ever say that we represent and are okay without whānau consent. And therefore, when I'm thinking about shared benefits, I'm also thinking, how might we also get those benefits back out into our people, back to our communities? And one of the ideas that, we had posited, what blockchain was, we were hoping it could do was to be able to have a series of smart contracts that would enable shared benefits to be, shot right across everybody inside your network. So that if people did want your data, or they did want to do something with your information, hey, look, let's get a message out to the network. And if they agree, ka pai, here's a little digital contract to confirm what that looks like, and what elements of the agreement is met. And boom, you got a bit of money, you got an DigiCoin, boom, straight into your wallet. We don't have that current situation at the moment where large organizations like Facebook are using our data and selling it without shared benefit. So I still think Web3 and the future of these technologies will enable us to do so. But I think it's important that we're playing in this space, because my other worry and concern is not that people don't want to work with Māori or Indigenous peoples. It's that we haven't built the railroad. We don't own the railroad. So we have to kind of use our partnership skill really, really wisely and ask if they're prepared. Because like I said, when everything's done and dusted, who actually will benefit from the whole amount of traffic and opportunities and networks that you bring in onto their railroad? They're the ones that are going to be clipping that ticket and taxing every single second. So I want to make sure that our people are part of that as well. Sorry, that was a rant.
No, that's all right. It was a good one too. I'm just aware of the time. We've got a couple more minutes. I was just wondering if there's anyone else that has a question from the audience, and then after that, Kay Marie might just get final thoughts, and I can close this off with a karakia. So, is there any other pātai from the audience?
I had a question.
Sure.
Yes, I'm wondering if Kay has any support on aligning the Māori values with the strategy of the government agencies. Like, for example, that's one thing, aligning the values from Maori so that they're taken into consideration. The other one, designing a framework to work with Maori. So wondering if Kay has any support.
Look, to be honest, Betsy, thank you for your question. You know, we were trying to apply principles that collectives, you know, practitioners and academics from Te Mana Raronga, you know, they had built the Māori data sovereignty framework and principles, and we had to kind of go through. I was quite particular because I was trying to figure out how do we apply all of these principles to the design of our software and the application inside our business and the way that we tell our story, but also to help give faith to our communities that their data was safe. And I think step one, that there is quite a lot of amazing information that's housed within Te Mana Raronga. I reached out a few times because they are one network. I think another network is the Iwi Data Group, Iwi Leaders Data Group, and Te Kāhui Raronga. So I've been watching their work to see how they're negotiating as a mana to mana relationship. So this is kind of iwi to crown relationship, because that's a different type of relationship again. And in my mind, I thought, hey, our rangatira kind of set the frame for how the Crown need to be upholding Te Tiriti o Waitangi principles and behaviours to recognise the imbalance in the power structure and to ensure that partnership is a really solid place. And so then from there comes policy, and ideally it should be, with policy comes pūtea. And unfortunately, this is where things start to get a little bit clunky, because actually no one's got any money. No one's got any money to help us build our ideas and aspirations in technology. We've had to hustle. And unfortunately, many Māori who are in the tech space, we're either reliant on grant monies and or we've had to go offshore. So, so I think that there's still a lot of work to do where academia need to be working more closely with industry and entrepreneurs. And I think there needs to be some deeper research done and undertaken on what it actually looks like when a company utilizes these frameworks in real life, and how does it influence or impact the product that you're creating at the other end.
Yes, yeah, it's very, it's a big challenge to align principle values with digital technology. That's a big challenge, and hopefully, the more we work with Māori, the more we learn, and hopefully there is a road, where we can meet and then have a co-design approach.
I think that, to be honest, there's a lot of work going on. Janelle Riki's been doing some beautiful work with organisations, also Digital Identity New Zealand, to help them set up a dynamic treaty framework, treaty training, treaty development, which might in itself seem not that interesting, but actually those are fundamental critical power sharing agreements that are very critical when it comes to ensuring that we have equitable investment in our development. And this isn't just around developing emergent technologies. We're also demanding that our treaty partner invests equitably in training in our development. One of my bros, Lee Tumutumu, is embarking on standing up a treaty claim. And I think that the Crown has let us down woefully, or has behaved woefully when it comes to investing in technology capabilities of Māori communities. It's a tragedy. So therefore, reparation, fair investment. But I also think, we're actually really onto it. We're really clever. We know exactly where we're going, where we're heading. We don't need people to be paternalistic and tell us what to do. we just really need, your investment, your support, to help us get to where we need to go for the benefit of our generations and future generations.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Betsy.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Betsy. That's a great question. So just to wrap up, I just want to invite you, Kay Marie, to give any final thoughts or any kind of takeaways from the session.
The other night I watched this interview of a guy, CEO of an AI company called, I think it was Nvidia, NVIDA.
NVIDIA,
and this guy said, hey, look, if you were to go back and talk to your 20, 30-year-old self, I hate those questions, what would you say? And he said, to be honest, I'd tell myself, don't do it. That's what he said. But he said, however, the benefit of being an entrepreneur and having entrepreneurial thinking and operating is that in this moment in time, how hard can it be? And if you just kind of block it off in moments of time, how hard can it be? And we've had some real hard moments, especially when you can't see the horizon and you don't know where you're going. You don't even know if you're going in the right direction or if anyone really gives a shit about what you're trying to do. But like I said, we were kind of OG trailblazers in some regards and quite behind in others. But what I did notice with the NFT craze that went down was that everybody started to become blockchain practitioners or interested. And I actually think that was positive, even though there was a boom and a bust and some of the technologies and shit coins and all these things that popped out. I thought it was neat because it was finally something that Māori could get interested in and explore and connect to, which I think was, which just helped to have different conversations, and more people were having conversations around our role as Māori, Mātauranga Māori in these technology spaces that we never had before. My final thought is a reflection on something interesting in the genealogy space and coming back to some of these broader companies. So we've done quite extensive research, and I didn't just stay here in Aotearoa. I've gone around the world to have a look at some of the best practitioners in their work, and hence the reason why I came back to the Church of the Latter-day Saints. They've been gathering genealogy data for over 100 years across 56 different countries plus, and they've been doing it for a long time. So whilst you've got this kind of tech stack, you also have a spirituality stack, which I kind of bumped into quite at different times around what they were doing with the back-end data. So of interest, have a look at, there was a bit of a ruckus between Ancestry.com and those 23andMe who were run by Israelis, but the spiritual use of data and what they were doing with it as Latter-day Saints in their baptism of the dead process was very interesting. And I think where I want to head into the future, or where I see this future, is, we're going to be in a place where we don't have devices. We're going to be having basically a deviceless future for technology. So I'm imagining interfaces similar to what you see in Iron Man when he's trying to build out his Iron Man suit, and he's got a hologram that he's working with. I imagine in the future holographic ways of us engaging with our whakapapa information, us having our tupuna coming in and hanging with us because we've kind of downloaded a consciousness into our tupuna. I can imagine that as a future. And also I'm very interested in genomics and the power of genomics. So how do we use our ancestry information to track our past and our health and our well-being? And also how can we use that collective knowledge to support us in interventions and health practices that will ensure our longevity as a whānau as well. So, and also more collective savings, more collective uses of data, more collective decision making around data and information is kind of where I see we'll be heading to over the next 10 to 20 years.
Kia ora, Kay Marie. That's an interesting look into what the future may be and the positive benefits of data and technology, whilst trying to balance that out with responsibility and care. So thank you for your kōrero today. Just aware of the time, I'll close us off with a quick karakia and then wish you all the best for the rest of the day. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māmati ngākou, te tinana, te wairoa e te ara tangata. Ko ia rā e rongo whakairia ake kirunga, tūturu whakamaua kia tina, haumie huie, tāiki e. Kia ora whānau, and have a good rest of the day and hope to see you in the next webinar. Ka kite.
Ora.